Introduction. So, what are we going to talk about in this project? First of all, we will communicate the practices between Latin Europe and Latin America. Then, the relationship building process between these two clusters. Also, we will analyze the leadership practices on Globe Project, then give the approach to ethics and sustainability. Another point is the impact of external actors such as labor unions, also government, society, and leadership practices. We also need to provide examples of companies and leaders that focus us on idiosyncrasy of leadership in those chosen cultures. Last but not least, also give a conclusion and recommendation.
So I'm going to talk about relationship building process. So trust is a key element in maintaining good trading relationships. The relationship was has a different process of building depending on different factors. However, we can ask what factors facilitate trust in a partner outside their environment. Does culture come into play? What are the differences between Europe and Latin America? So I'm going to start with Europe culture. So for managers from Western cultures, they consider that when they have a new business partner, it's because it's trustworthy. For them, anyone can be trusted until proven otherwise. However, when negotiating a deal, they make sure that the person in front of them is honest and bona fide. They pay a lot of attention to the behavior and the answers given to their questions. Often they already have the answer. This ensures the reliability of a new business partner. It's important for that the dialogue is fair and that the information shared during the negotiation is sufficient for both parties. European managers do not rely on the social but on the ability to do business with their new partners. If both parties are willing to do business together, then a business relationship is built, not a friendly personal relationship. Latin America cultures. Now, in the Latin America cultures, is really different. Really different. Social relationship is much more important. It comes before business. For example, the values that the two partners may have in common are important criterion for judging the reliability of the new business partner. For example, if the values are not common, they will decide between themselves whether to continue the negotiation or not. Managers in Latin America rely on the opinion of others as a first opinion to determine the reliability of a relationship with the new business partner. The main objective of salespeople is to eliminate the people with a bad reputation. That is why before establishing the business relationship, a social contact is very important in Latin America countries, talking over a meal, for example, to get to know each other. There is bound to be a moment when the collaborator shows his true face. So, to conclude, the difference we have observed are related to cultural levels of trust and the attachment employees have to their cultures. It depends on the monitoring of social behavior and the violation of social norms. The consequences that will be enable employees to conclude a business deal or not. This is why it's very important to find out about the way of negotiating in the company or the country of the business partner.
So now we're going to talk about Globe Project. There are 6 leadership dimensions that will be compared between two clusters. The first one is Latin America and the second one is Latin Europe. So the first dimension that we will talk about is the charismatic value based leadership. In Latin Europe, this cluster has an average score in Globe Project. It has a realistic vision, also has an average performance orientation. Compared to Latin America, this cluster has the second highest ranking for charismatic leadership, and it highlights that they have a really high realistic vision and also a high performance orientation. Also, two main points is that they show integrity and decisiveness. Now, the second dimension is team oriented leadership. So in Latin Europe, the results show that they have an average team-oriented leadership. And what are some main characteristics, or what do they value? Basically, this society values leaders whose characteristics include developing outstanding teams by using their administrative and interpersonal skills. In Latin America, this cluster also has no, this has a very high and is the highest of our rankings of the clusters. So it's very important because they show a very interpersonal skills to create cohesive working groups. The third dimension is participative leadership. And in Latin Europe, this leadership dimension is valued and its score in Globe Project is average. And some of the basic characteristics that they show in this dimension is a non-participative and also autocratic leadership. Compared to Latin America, this cluster has an average result, and also the characteristics that include are implementing good decisions. On the fourth dimension is the human-oriented leadership. In Latin Europe, this leadership dimension is viewed slightly positive, but is tied for the lowest 12 clusters. And why is it important? Because they have two basic characteristics, that's modesty and also human orientation. A very important, basically, characteristic for this dimension. In Latin America, it has an average, basically, score, and is also average compared to all the clusters. In autonomous leadership, we can say that it's viewed slightly negative. But why is it viewed like this? Because some of the characteristics is that the persons and the leaders work by themselves. They're individualistic. Also, they are autonomous, and that's why it seemed very negative. And in Latin America, this ranking is one of the lowest because it rejects autonomous leadership, and the leaders work alone and also independent. The last but not least, we have self protective leadership. And what can we say? This dimension is also viewed negatively, indicating that these societies reject leaders who are also self centered and status conscious. Now, compared to Latin America, we can say that this cluster is relatively high because they indicate and also they maintain safety and security. That is the main critical um, theme in this cluster.
In Latin America, external factors such as governments or corporations can have a strong impact on the business of local companies. Indeed, in some countries like Venezuela, for example, the civil war and the deep economic crisis have been the cause of many company closures. In Colombia, the presidential election that is currently taking place could bring about a major change in the country and in the way business are run. If elected, the left-wing party has promised to shed light on corruption in the state and on agreement with companies to distribute wealth more equitably. Even though there is a trend toward a greater equality and neutrality in the factors driving South American companies, in some countries, those factors still have a strong impact on local economies and on local business. On the other side, in Europe, for example, governments have only a minor impact on companies. They act more as regulators and control institutions for companies. With the European Union, the way of doing business in Europe is globally harmonized on the global territory. Institutions or states can nevertheless influence the job and the growth of company by putting in place financial and political rules that are more or less advantageous for support growth. So to conclude this part, the main difference between these two regions of the world is the harmonization of laws. With harmonized laws on continent scale, Europe guarantees more economic and social stability than in Latin America and South America. where each country has its own laws and is subject to the political and social conflicts they may face, that it's not equal with each country.
Well, now we are going to talk about the communication practices. So, in those Latin Europe countries such as Italy, Switzerland, Israel, the communication is mostly indirect and implicit. So, you're asking, what does it mean? Well, that requires a certain degree of a contextual knowledge in order to be fully understood by the people. So we can say that the messages must be implicit too, because the context is more valuable than the words in that environment. Also, we have the use of nonverbal communication, such as body movements, gestures, are too significant. Well, on the other side, we have that the reliance on the written communication is relatively low. So that means that the unwritten rules, the social codes, and the rituals tends to be assumed by the people. Finally, we have that the procedures are somewhat flexible. Well, now we can say that the people in Latin Europe made their decisions based on feelings and emotional factors. All those tips are important for people who wants to visit the country for work or tourism.
Well, about approach to ethics and sustainability, ethics you can find it in everywhere and in everything we do. You can be an ethical component. For example, the way of research ethics is interpreted at the European Commissions needs to be collaborative and constructive. Within the European regulatory framework, research ethics is based on the explicit of European commissions to the human right. To further strengthen this, the European adopted their own human rights legislation, that is the European Charter of Fundamental Rights. Well, and in the case of Latin America, corruption and impunity became a serious moral disease on the region, probably due to a long period of time. And low ethical standards in politics has had a deep impact on individuals and organizations and economy systems. For the hand, excessive of materialism and selfishness are in contrast with the real poverty attitudes and principles of many Latin American countries. And about the surveillance related effort has been done in order to enhance the business ethics through educations and publications and the professional activities. Thanks.